June 1996. Malibu, California. A homeowner returns from vacation to find something that would terrify anyone. A stranger, passed out cold in their 11-year-old son's bed. The intruder is shoeless, barely conscious, and has somehow broken into the house thinking it was his own home. The police arrive within minutes. The man can barely stand. His speech is slurred. He's disoriented, confused, and clearly under the influence of multiple substances. When they ask for his name, the officers can't believe what they're hearing. That man? Robert Downey Jr. Not just any actor. One of Hollywood's most talented performers. A man who had been nominated for an Academy Award just 4 years earlier. A generational talent, now reduced to this, breaking into a stranger's home in a drug-fueled haze. The mugshot that followed would become one of the most infamous images of the 1990s. Dead eyes. Hollow cheeks. A man who had lost everything. But here's what most people don't know, this wasn't rock bottom. Not even close. Because what happened over the next 3 years would take Robert Downey Jr. to places darker than anyone could imagine. And then, miraculously, it would lead to one of the greatest comebacks in Hollywood history. This is the story of how Robert Downey Jr. went from Hollywood's most notorious addict, arrested multiple times, unemployable, and on the brink of death, to becoming Iron Man, one of the highest paid actors in the world, and 22 years sober. This is the story of why Robert Downey Jr. quit drinking alcohol for good, and how one woman's ultimatum changed everything. If you're fascinated by real stories of transformation, struggle, and redemption, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're diving deep into Robert Downey Jr.'s journey. A man who had everything the world could offer, lost it all in the most public and humiliating way possible, and then clawed his way back to become one of the most beloved figures in entertainment. This isn't just a celebrity story. It's a story about addiction, about hitting rock bottom, about the people who save us when we can't save ourselves, and about the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Make sure you stick around until the end, because the moment that finally made him quit will surprise you. Now, let's rewind to where it all began. Robert Downey Jr. wasn't just talented. He was a once-in-a-generation prodigy. Born on April 4, 1965, in Manhattan, New York, Robert grew up in a world that most of us can barely imagine. His father, Robert Downey Sr., was an underground filmmaker, part of the counterculture movement of the 1960s and 70s. Young Robert was literally raised on movie sets, appearing in his father's films as early as age 5. By the time he was a teenager, Robert Jr. was already a working actor. He dropped out of high school to pursue acting full-time, and by his early 20s, he was being hailed as one of the most promising young talents in Hollywood. In 1987, at just 22 years old, he starred in Less Than Zero, playing a wealthy young addict spiraling out of control. The irony wouldn't become clear until years later. Then came his breakthrough. In 1992, he portrayed Charlie Chaplin in the biographical film Chaplin. His performance was so extraordinary, so transformative, that it earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor at age 27. Critics called him brilliant. A chameleon. The next great actor of his generation. He had the talent, the looks, the charm, the charisma, the career trajectory that most actors spend their entire lives dreaming about. But behind the red carpets and the critical acclaim, a nightmare was quietly unfolding. A nightmare that had actually started decades earlier. Because here's the devastating truth that Robert would later reveal. He was introduced to drugs by his own father. At 6 years old. Let me say that again. 6 years old. In interviews years later, Robert described it as a horribly misguided attempt at bonding. His father was deep in his own struggles with addiction, immersed in the drug culture of the 1960s. And in what can only be described as a catastrophic failure of parenting, he began sharing drugs with his young son. Robert Downey Sr. would later express deep regret for this, calling it his greatest failure as a father. But by then, the damage was done. By age 8, Robert Jr. was using drugs regularly. Marijuana at first, then other substances as he got older. By his teens, drug use wasn't an occasional thing. It was just his normal. His baseline. His everyday reality. Think about that for a moment. Most of us associate childhood with innocence. Playing outside with friends. Birthday parties. Learning to ride a bike. Building forts. Watching cartoons. Robert's childhood? It was drugs. It was watching his parents' marriage fall apart. It was instability, chaos, and substances as a coping mechanism before he was even old enough to understand what coping meant. And here's the insidious thing about addiction: when it starts that young, it doesn't feel like a problem. It feels normal. It becomes woven into the fabric of who you are. Psychologists call this adverse childhood experiences, and they have long-lasting effects on brain development, emotional regulation, and decision-making. When a child's brain is still forming and they're exposed to addictive substances, it fundamentally changes their neural pathways. So even as Robert's career exploded through the late 80s and early 90s, even as he was collecting awards and starring in major films, the addiction was always there, lurking in the background, growing stronger, waiting to take over completely. And in 1996, it did. The arrest in the stranger's bed in Malibu? That was just the first domino to fall. What followed was a cascade of increasingly desperate and destructive behavior that would be documented by every tabloid in America. Let me walk you through just some of what happened in 1996 alone, because the sheer volume of it is staggering. In June, there was the Malibu break-in I mentioned. But just a few weeks before that, he'd been pulled over on Sunset Boulevard, speeding in his pickup truck. When police searched the vehicle, they found heroin, cocaine, and a .357 Magnum pistol. He was arrested, released on bail, and then almost immediately violated the terms of his probation. He missed mandatory drug tests multiple times. He was in and out of court hearings, in and out of rehab facilities, in and out of jail. He was sentenced to 3 years probation, ordered to enter a live-in drug treatment facility. And then, in what might be the most heartbreaking detail of all, while he was supposed to be in rehab, he walked out. Just left. And went on another bender. By 1997, he was sentenced to 6 months in the Los Angeles County Jail. By 1999, after yet another violation, he was sentenced to 3 years in California's Substance Abuse Treatment Facility and State Prison. Let that sink in. A man who had been nominated for an Oscar was now inmate number P50522 in a state prison. But here's where the story gets even more tragic. Even during the worst of this spiral, Hollywood kept trying to give him chances. Because his talent was undeniable. In 2000, fresh out of prison and seemingly committed to recovery, he landed the role of Larry Paul on the hit TV show Ally McBeal. And he was phenomenal. Critics raved about his performance. The show's ratings improved. He brought charm, humor, and depth to the character. He even won a Golden Globe for the role in 2001. For a brief moment, it looked like the comeback was real. Like Robert Downey Jr. had finally turned his life around. But then, in April 2001, it all came crashing down again. He was found wandering barefoot through Culver City in the middle of the night, clearly under the influence. When police approached him, he was incoherent. Tests later revealed cocaine and Valium in his system. He was arrested. Again. And this time, there were consequences that went beyond jail time. He was immediately fired from Ally McBeal. The show that had given him a second chance now had no choice but to let him go. But worse than that, his insurance premiums became so astronomically high that major studios literally couldn't afford to hire him. One Hollywood executive was quoted saying that hiring Robert Downey Jr. was not worth the risk, no matter how talented he is. Think about what that means. You're one of the most gifted actors of your generation. Critics have called you brilliant. You've proven you can carry a TV show, a movie, any role you're given. And nobody will hire you. Not because you lack talent, but because you can't stop destroying yourself. His personal life was in ruins too. His wife, Deborah Falconer, whom he'd married in 1992, divorced him. He lost custody of his son, Indio. Friends distanced themselves. His father, racked with guilt, watched helplessly as his son spiraled further. Robert later described this period as feeling like he was watching himself from outside his own body. He knew what he was doing was insane. He knew drugs were killing him. But he couldn't stop. And here's the thing about addiction that people who haven't experienced it struggle to understand. It's not about weakness. It's not about lacking willpower or moral fiber. Addiction is a disease that hijacks the brain's reward system. It rewires your neural pathways so that the substance becomes more important than food, than safety, than family, than life itself. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and impulse control, becomes impaired. Meanwhile, the limbic system, which controls cravings and emotions, goes into overdrive. Robert described it perfectly in an interview years later. He said he knew, intellectually, that drugs were destroying him. But stopping felt like dying. The addiction had convinced his brain that cocaine and alcohol were necessary for survival. By 2002, Robert Downey Jr. had lost absolutely everything. His career was over. His family was gone. His reputation was destroyed. His bank account was empty. He was 37 years old, and by all appearances, his story was finished. Not with redemption or recovery, but with tragedy. But then, in 2003, something unexpected happened. Something that would change the entire trajectory of his life. He met a woman named Susan Levin. Addiction is a disease that hijacks the brain's reward system. It rewires your neural pathways so that the substance becomes more important than food, than safety, than family, than life itself. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and impulse control, becomes impaired. Meanwhile, the limbic system, which controls cravings and emotions, goes into overdrive. Robert described it perfectly in an interview years later. He said he knew, intellectually, that drugs were destroying him. But stopping felt like dying. The addiction had convinced his brain that cocaine and alcohol were necessary for survival. By 2002, Robert Downey Jr. had lost absolutely everything. His career was over. His family was gone. His reputation was destroyed. His bank account was empty. He was 37 years old, and by all appearances, his story was finished. Not with redemption or recovery, but with tragedy. But then, in 2003, something unexpected happened. Something that would change the entire trajectory of his life. He met a woman named Susan Levin. Susan Levin was a film producer. Smart, successful, and no-nonsense. They met on the set of the 2003 movie, Gothica, a psychological thriller where Robert had managed to land a supporting role. He was fresh out of rehab, fragile, uncertain, but trying his absolute best to stay clean. Susan knew who he was. She knew his history. She knew about the arrests, the relapses, the chaos. And she gave him an ultimatum that would save his life. She looked him in the eye and said, "I'm not going to be in a relationship with someone who's using. You either get clean and stay clean, or we're done." Now, you might be thinking, well, people probably told him that before. And you'd be absolutely right. His ex-wife had begged him. His friends had pleaded. His father had cried. So what made Susan different? Here's what Robert himself said in an interview years later. Susan didn't just demand that he change. She believed in the man he could become. Not the actor. Not the celebrity. The man. She saw past the addiction, past the mistakes, past the mugshots. She saw Robert's potential, his goodness, his intelligence. And she believed, truly believed, that he was capable of becoming that person. And for the first time in his life, Robert wanted to be that man more than he wanted the drugs. He went back into treatment. But this time was different. This time, he didn't just go through the motions. He committed fully. He worked with therapists to address the childhood trauma that had fueled his addiction. He attended 12-step meetings, not because he was court-ordered, but because he wanted to. He took up meditation. He started practicing Wing Chun, a form of martial arts that requires intense focus and discipline. The physical practice gave him a way to channel his energy, to quiet his mind, to feel present in his body again. He surrounded himself with people who supported his sobriety. He cut ties with anyone who was still using. He restructured his entire life around staying clean. But most importantly, Robert stopped running from his past. In interviews since, he's been brutally, almost painfully honest about his addiction. He doesn't minimize it. He doesn't make excuses. He owns every mistake, every arrest, every moment of chaos. He said that sobriety isn't about never thinking about drugs. The cravings don't just disappear. Recovery is about choosing something better, every single day. Sometimes every single hour. He's described his addiction as a spiritual malady, a deep disconnection from himself and from other people. And recovery for him has been about reconnecting, about being present, about showing up for the people he loves. In August 2005, Robert and Susan got married. And from that day to this, Robert hasn't touched drugs or alcohol. 22 years sober as of 2025. But here's the truly incredible part. His career didn't just recover. It exploded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. In 2007, director Jon Favreau was casting a risky new movie. A superhero film based on a character that most people outside of comic book fans had never heard of. Iron Man. And for the lead role of Tony Stark, a billionaire genius with a troubled past who builds a suit of armor to become a hero, Favreau wanted Robert Downey Jr. The studio executives at Marvel were absolutely terrified. Remember, just 5 years earlier, Robert had been considered uninsurable. He was a liability. A risk. Someone you didn't bet on. But Favreau saw something that nobody else did. He saw that Robert Downey Jr. wouldn't have to act like a man who'd hit rock bottom and clawed his way back to redemption. He was that man. Tony Stark's journey in the film, from an arrogant, self-destructive weapons manufacturer to a self-sacrificing hero, mirrored Robert's own transformation. The vulnerability beneath the bravado. The guilt over past mistakes. The determination to be better. Robert didn't have to pretend. He just had to be himself. And audiences around the world felt it. The authenticity. The depth. The humanity. Iron Man premiered in May 2008 and made over $585 million worldwide. It launched the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which would become the most successful film franchise in history. Robert Downey Jr. appeared in 10 Marvel films over the next 11 years, culminating in Avengers Endgame in 2019, which became one of the highest-grossing films of all time. By 2015, Robert was the highest-paid actor in Hollywood, earning an estimated $80 million in a single year. But here's what matters more than the box office numbers or the paychecks or the fame. Robert Downey Jr. became living, breathing proof that your past doesn't have to define your future. He's now a devoted husband to Susan, who he credits with saving his life. He's a present, involved father to his 3 children. He's an advocate for criminal justice reform, using his own experience with incarceration to push for change. In a 2024 interview, reflecting on his journey, Robert said something that I think perfectly captures what sobriety means to him. "I don't think I'd be alive if I hadn't gotten sober. And I certainly wouldn't be happy. Sobriety gave me my life back, but more than that, it gave me myself back. It gave me the ability to be present, to love people, to be loved. That's worth more than any role I've ever played." So why did Robert Downey Jr. quit drinking alcohol? Because he finally realized that the temporary escape wasn't worth the permanent destruction. Because a woman named Susan believed in him when the entire world had written him off. Because he wanted to be a father that his children could be proud of, not another cautionary tale. Because he understood that recovery isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, doing the work, and choosing life over oblivion, one day at a time. And because, after 37 years of running from himself, he was finally ready to face the man in the mirror. If you or someone you love is struggling with addiction, please hear this: recovery is possible. It's never too late to turn your life around. Robert's story proves that. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments. And subscribe, because next time we're covering another incredible celebrity transformation that will blow your mind. Thanks for watching. And remember, your lowest moment doesn't have to be your final chapter.